How does the Paco call this, like going from the mind to the heart?
Reality, living life, normal. Um, to Westerners, it's crazy because it's emotional. It's irrational, and yet it's so intelligent. It has the codes to everything, and that's why we're at the moment bringing out the life codes of the Andes that have been kept until this time, because the ancestors through oral tradition have passed along that at this time the people in the north will get tired of power trips. They'll find falsity in things. They'll realize that no matter how successful they are, there's something missing. The system that I was brought up on in the suburbs of the United States wasn't addressing the fundamental issues of life, which are love, which are connectivity, which is collective consciousness. And so then it's our responsibility to complement that with life ways and structures and programs and communities that are based in the authenticity of tried and true living practices that have been kept for us on purpose for us who are ready to remember.
Welcome, welcome, everyone. Today, I'm so blessed to be with one of my brothers that I reconnected with a few months ago. And he accepted to come and have this great conversation with us today on Enosis Conversation. So I'm delighted and really touched by the depth of this being. And I would like to introduce you to Jeffrey William, who is an incredible human being who's from the North, the United States, and discovered from the bottom of his heart his way into the light and found the light in many traditions, but specifically in the lineage of the Paco Andino, the Alto Masayo, down in Peru. And he's here today to share his experience of life and how he navigated this path since he's a child, really, and how he discovered who he really is and how he's still on this path to discover it. So, Jeffrey, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's such a great time to come together and help other people remember who they are, because the world's in such a dichotomy right now that we really need everything. And this one thing about discovering this tradition so long ago was it just filled in all the pieces that were missing in my life that I sought elsewhere, and ultimately achieving success in a Western standard, things like that. There was just always something missing. So it's been a really, it's been a real blessing for me to be able to uh, understand that. And in the process of understanding that, the thing that comes up is we have to let go of everything that we're not, all the concepts and ideas and methodologies and things that we've learned that in the end may be successful, but maybe mixed with some survival strategies. So hopefully we can get into all that today and kind of create a soup so people can pull up a chair and feed themselves.
Absolutely. And to put things in context a little bit, I would like to talk about how we got in touch. And the funniest thing is we got in touch first by one of your creation, which was the film
Mm.
on the lives and the practices of the Paco Andino. And I will always remember it was 2 years ago in October, like scrolling on Gaia.tv, and I was like in search for wisdom. And
Oh
I
yeah.
just wrote the keyword wisdom keepers, and fair enough, it's like the first documentary that popped out. And so I was like, oh yeah, let's watch that. Paco and Dino. It looks like it's pretty deep. And I started just like pressing play, and the first image that came, which was I think was a written text. That's how
Mm.
the movie starts, and it like started to activate my heart centered, and right away I knew I was going to be um, not watching something, but I was going to be in contact with some sort of wisdom that was already vibrating inside of me. And this didn't happen often in my
Mm.
life, this kind of inner feeling. So when the movie started to feeling the emotion coming in, and started to feel more grounded, actually, which was really interesting for me. And as the movie went on, and I saw the first ceremony done by the Pacos, I started sobbing. Like I started crying, but crying from a state of joy, from a state of remembrance, which is not something that happened a lot in my life, which I had to actually question myself about what's happening inside of me right now. This is not normal crying like when you're watching a romantic movie and like you're feeling the emotion of the character. This was something way deeper, connected to a truth, a shared truth that we can all tap in as a human being, because we all part of this grand tapestry of evolution of consciousness and connection with these with Pachamama, with the Mother Earth, and with the Father Sky and the celestial realm, which the Pacos are highly tapped into. And this for me was literally part of the awakening of who I truly am. And by the end of the movie, like the last ceremony that they've done, I was like literally like in tears. And at some point, I had the insight inside of me that these are my brothers. I've been there. I've done those ceremonies. I've been with them. I've been in these mountains and these places, and this is what was activated inside of me in that moment. And a little bit later, after I watched the documentary, my ego started popping in and said like, "Oh, maybe you had a bad night of sleep. Like maybe you're a bit emotional today, JF. Maybe like this is just the movie. Like just toss that on the side. Like this, you're inventing all of these things. And I was like, okay, I'm agreeing a part maybe with what you're telling me as a story, but let's rewatch it a few weeks later. And I rewatched it a few weeks later. It was even more powerful. So I was like, okay, seriously, there's really something here, but I'm going to rewatch it a third time just to make sure that this is the real thing. And I waited a few months. And after a few months, I rewatched it. And then there was no doubt that there was a deep truth that was being shared in the images and the sound and the motion, the movement and the energy of these places, of the Pacos, and what you created as a production of this movie. And I waited before I got in touch with you, because I was receiving like, now it's not the time for you to go on this trip and connect to this lineage. You still have some deeper work to do, which I listened to, which I waited until it was the right time. And when it was the right time, I called you and we got in touch. And I realized that you had a similar life story to mine. And at this time, it was one of the first time that I really felt seen by another human being for what was happening inside of myself, which was a deeper truth that I couldn't share with anybody, because they would call me crazy. They would say like, have you lost your mind? And when I met you, you said like, people are telling me, have you lost your mind? And I say, yeah, I've been working at it for a long time.
Exactly.
Meaning these things need to be reframed, like we need to reframe the way we're thinking, the way we're seeing the world, the way we're entering in relationship with self, with others, so we can come back to who we are and live from our heart and not be directed from our mind all the time. The First Nation call it like the red road, coming from the mind to the heart.
Yep.
And living from the heart. And I'm curious, how does the Paco call this, like going from the mind to the heart?
Reality, living life, normal. To Westerners, it's crazy because it's emotional. It's irrational, and yet it's so intelligent. It has the codes to everything, and that's why we're at the moment bringing out the life codes of the Andes that have been kept until this time, because the ancestors through oral tradition have passed along that at this time the people in the north will get tired of power trips. They'll find falsity in things. They'll realize that no matter how successful they are, there's something missing. And they speak to those that will find the light from the darkness of their times, and there'll be those when they get tired of power, they'll seek truth. And the truth is the realm of the heart, and the heart informs our mind. And in the Andes, we have Yachai, which is the balance between the intuitive intelligence and the experiential intelligence. And one of the problems in the West is we stay in the experiential intelligence, and then that's associated with the limbic mind. And then we go to non-rational thought because we're in fight, flight, and freeze, and then we're justifying it or denying it or lost in cognitive dissonance. Creating reality is to justify what feels safe, but what's safe is what has been normalized. And if abuse is normalized, then that's safe. So we recreate it unbeknownst to ourselves. So this whole time is where we come and we create an avenue. For example, this film, Wisdom Keepers Paco and Dino, was a gift from the lineage to the people, including myself, and everybody involved. And it basically was an experience to remember what it was like and what it can be and what it is. And to quote an elder, if you want to know God, get rid of everything you're not. And so as we strip away these false constructs and these, even the time, the calendars, all of that are the Gregorian calendar is a false construct. We're a 1328 cycle. We're not a 1224 cycle. And the Mayans know that, and the indigenous, the Andeans know that. And so it's a matter of adjusting ourselves back to the natural rhythms of ourselves, and our identification of ourselves, which is the heart as opposed to the mind. And one of the things that cracks me up these days, my partner says she's a recovering academic. And what she means by that is all the structure that gets through master's, PhD, and all that, and Excel sheets and contingency plans. If it doesn't work out and proof, it's asinine. We're basically throwing out theories and then trying to prove them when quantum intelligence tells us that the observer affects the observed. So Buddha said all the world is our mind. Francis Bacon masquerading as Shakespeare said all the world is a stage. And what that means to me is we are creating our reality through our perception, which become our beliefs that eventually become our actions. And then we perpetuate the victimization of the separation, the most violent place we can be, so that we can justify a reality that we know how to handle. And we call that normal. And then you call being in the heart crazy. So we're really at that transition time. And in the Andes, it's called the Panchakuti. And that's when all the the structures fall away and this new growth comes out of it. And that grows up from here. And the Andean tradition is a feminine tradition. So it's based on an ascending model that comes up from the earth, reaches out to the stars like the arbor of a tree, and receives the starlight, the information, the higher consciousness. And then those two realms meet in the heart. And then that heart generates our toroidal field. So it's kind of technical, but overall, I wanted to say about your commentaries about the film, thank you for confirming that the film is working, because that's exactly why we made it. It's like a little
it certainly did for me.
Yeah. A little ding on top of the head, like, what? Hold on. What's going on here? And we have to listen to that voice, I feel. And that's one thing I did, because I went out with many different workings in media, in various things, and always thinking if I get to a higher level, it'll be better. And so I got to the highest levels, and it was the worst it could be, because it was so based in false constructs, false realities, literally creating a desire in fashion, in advertising, in television, in film, until I realized at 27 years old, I was just starting a Saturn return. I was like, wait, I'm just prostituting myself to create false realities, and they're paying me well for it. Something's drastically upside down here. And that was really the beginning where the earthquake started to go. It actually started in my youth, but it really didn't hit home until I went through a good decade of being in the world and exploring and realizing that the system that I was brought up on in the suburbs of the United States wasn't addressing the fundamental issues of life, which are love, which are connectivity, which is collective consciousness, meaning I make my decisions based on what is best, not just for the person sitting in front of me and the village around me, but in the Iroquois tradition, the next 7 generations. So what is truly sustainable? What is truly conscious? And that means you have to unpack a lot of stuff. And that process of dying back, or letting the leaves fall off the tree and going into the cold, seemingly cold winter, where we hibernate, so that we can bring that garden of consciousness that next spring, and we're doing that in a world that's illuminated 24/7 with electricity and LEDs and fluorescence and all these radiation-bound devices. So we got our work cut out for us, but it's something that the elders have as I was mentioning, stewarded through their stories, which are called prophecies, to let us know that at this time these things are happening. And 2025 is the culmination of this Panchakuti period. That's 50 years between 1975 and 2025. And then we're kind of in revelations right now. We're really discovering the darkness, really discovering it doesn't work. And then that's going to open into the rebuilding period, which is the coming together in collective, coming together as a people. And then like the phoenix resurrecting from what appears to be the ashes, which is just happens to be the Lego castle that we built got broken and smashed to pieces in the rage of this isn't working. And then we come together and say, hey, how we build it this time. So there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, yeah, and thanks for speaking about these details and these transitions, because when I watched the movie, it was in 2023, and I watched the movie 2-3 months after I did my first sweat lodge ceremony with an Algonquian community here, nation up in Mont Tremblant, and in that experience, which was with the Innu chief, which was a community that hasn't been really affected like the other communities in Quebec by the government bringing the kids in pension houses and like all that stuff. So they were kind of saved in a way, but this community actually been hit by modernization. They've been hit by what we went through ourselves as a young child. So they basically were gentrified into the modern world and created a gap in between the other communities and them. And the chief, Grégoire, was actually telling us stories about his childhood that looked like mine. Exactly. I was like, this guy's cool. So he kind of lived the same, but he told us like how this created like kind of a tear inside of themselves, because they were still connected to the tradition, but at the same time being pulled to the modern world. And in that first ceremony, I actually touched with the part of me that was scared to be in the dark. That was actually scared to be in a space where I couldn't see, be in a space where I had to feel, and really had to feel deeply. And I released that fear in that ceremony inside of the sweat lodge. And I will always remember I was so scared. I had like 10 on 10 in my mind. I was like, oh, you're not going to be able to do this ceremony. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be too warm. It's going to be too this, going to be too that. And I was like a child wanting to be in that little little bubble and not being touched, and I connected to Pachamama and to the singing and to the drumming. And at some point, it just like, it released. It released, and I sat in the sweat lodge, and I started speaking a language that I don't know at that time. So something was released. So something was being able to be expressed out of myself that was kept like this all my life, that created so much tension inside of me. And at that moment, I knew this was actually part of the prophecy, because I heard of the prophecy a year before. Like you heard, there's many prophecies, but the one I'm talking about is the Eagle, Quetzal, Condor prophecy, the unification of the North, of the Central, and the South, which they just had a reunion with some elders up in Quebec, also from all places in the Americas. And I felt connected to that prophecy. I felt called for duty. And the guy right beside me after the sweat lodge told me, I don't know what you were speaking. I don't know what you were saying, but I felt it was for the healing of all of us inside of the house, inside of the lodge. And I said, thank you. and I've started being more exposed to the prophecy and start being called to go to Mexico and do some harmonization there, and being led by my ancestors and being led by the ancestors in spirit from the territory where I was going. And these were completely new ways of seeing the world, completely new ways of walking on this very planet, on this very territory that I thought I knew. But I started realizing there's a much more to what we don't see that there is. And our multidimensionality is dormant inside of ourselves for most of us. We forgot. We forgot our divinity. We forgot that we carry this wisdom inside of us, and that the way through is within, is not seeking outside and going to all these places and like going in these books, watching like zillions hours of video. I certainly did that. But this is not where I found the truth. I found the truth inside of myself in the dark until the light came in. And when I connected with you, I felt the same thing, that first of all, I think there's not a lot of people that have this, I don't know how to call it. It's not, for me, it's not strength. It's more about curiosity of walking into the unknown and of discovering something different about oneself that is maybe completely outside of what we've been told by society, by our parents, by the media, by the political system, the education system, and so on. Maybe that is something that is lying deep within ourselves that is just waiting for us to create some sort of recipient for this to start growing.
Absolutely.
And flourishing.
Yeah, it's so it's a seed of consciousness, you might say, and the whole eagle, Quetzalcoatl, condor overlies Yachai, Munai, Yonkai, which are the three primary sinners that are emboldened by Cow's eye, or life force, that comes up from Purai. So I'm throwing some Quechuan terms in there, but what it basically gets
it's just lingo, guys.
Yeah, so what it gets to is we unify the fertile creative aspect, second chakra, with the willing, sometimes willful, but willing, third chakra, and that creates a sacred harmony. The heart and all of its emotions, and the unconditional loving heart creates a munai, or a loving union. And then, as I mentioned before, the intuitive and the experiential form, yachai, and that's eagle mind meeting with condor emotion, right? And coming to rest in the Quetzalcoatl, or the heart.
Yeah.
And whether it's Huiracocha or Wankan or Quetzalcoatl, or any of the names that have been given to these states of consciousness, right? The Wataha in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is a state of consciousness. The Egyptians, or the in Kemet before Egypt, in the dynasties, was a state of consciousness. In the Andes, is a state of consciousness that all relate to other civilizations that existed prior to their editing out of our histories. And so it is a homecoming. It's a coming back. It's exactly what you're saying. You're in a lodge. You're in the birth canal, or the womb rather, and you're finding light in the darkness of your times. That's the prophecy. And so as we come up into our consciousness and realize these things aren't working, then it's very important that we look around and find or receive conscious lifeways. And so for me, that's how the whole thing has culminated into what's happening now and bringing these lifeways forwards, because they fit the missing parts so perfectly and recreate the weave of collective consciousness. And then quite naturally, when we're thinking of what's best for you and I, or our families, or our communities, or our nation, or our planet, then we start to come into a true sustainability with it. And if not, then we're left out like a pilgrim, that's gone across the ocean to settle a new land and has to make sure they have enough whatever, otherwise they're eating their shoe leather, which is our memory, right?
Yeah.
And then the first time you get to the edge of the branch and mama tells you to go fly, I don't want to do it, right? But we find our wings on the way down, meaning that we take that leap of faith in a deep, okay, so what's the inspiration? What's the experience? Where's the balance point? right here? What do I draw down and store in my roots? What do I pull up in the minerals? How do I make my fruit? How do I become abundant in my harvest? And then at this time of the year in the north, in November, we have collected all of our crops and we're starting to gather and we're starting to look at, okay, what is not working, right? What do I keep so that I eat through the long hibernation of my internal journey to the north, to the white wolf, to the polar bear, to the place of wisdom, where I start to then look at, well, this year I'm going to try this in my garden because last year this was successful and this wasn't. So then back here in November, I'm looking at what seeds do I plant next year? What do I store so that I can come to fruition next year? So I can come to the place of harvest where things fall away, right? And it prepares. And so we're in these cycles of time and that have largely been disrupted by 60-hour work weeks, having the lights on in our houses until 11 p.m. Instead of waking up early and then going to bed early with the seasons. And so there's lots of things, organic food, organic or conscious medicine, I call it. All the ways we look after ourselves and one another that are based in a harmonic and nature, as opposed to false cycles, false concoctions. And so it's a great time of realization that this system is not working. And I think if we look at the world, we can see very much that the system that has been created to bring us out of our nature, out of our intelligence, out of our community, out of love, where we've grown afraid of each other, has been a grand failure. And thank God, because in the evolution of our consciousness as a soul, we have to journey into the light and into the dark. If you want to be a master of the light, you have to master the darkness, meaning you have to master the ego and the selfishness and the shadow, and come to forgiveness and loving presence, so that you can recognize that when someone is attacking you or me or someone from outside, they're doing it from a place of separation. They're doing it from a place of forgetfulness. They're doing it from a place where their soul chose to come into a certain situation to be so constrained or so traumatized. And that's hard to not just understand, but own, right? But when we get to that place of ownership, then we can get to the forgiveness, the ho'oponopono of thank you. I'm so sorry for stepping on your toes. Please forgive me. I love you, right? And if that other person hears that and can respond, then there's an invitation to love again. If they're not ready for that, it doesn't affect the person going through this process of consciousness, because they are simply realizing it doesn't matter what people think of me. Even if I'm ostracized, even if I'm having the Galileo effect where, they put you in jail and then years later they come and say, oh, you're actually correct. All of that process is to stand in the evolution of consciousness and one's soul, so that you can truly become an entrepreneur and truly not just perceive and think and act, but create from a consciousness based on an 80,000 foot perspective, so to speak. And that aligns perfectly with the tradition, which is you go through an initiatic journey up through 13 levels of consciousness. And the first one is ego. And the Quechua term for ego is caca. You got to deal with your shit. You got to deal with your projections. You got to deal with all of the the unconscious incompetence. I have no idea that I'm walking all over people. I'm so sorry, right? And then in our society, that pushes everybody away, criminalizes people, as opposed to really coming from both tips of the wing of the bird and be a centralist and saying we must liberally take care of everybody. And at the same time, we must conserve what is beautiful and right? And then in that functioning whole is what we're returning to. But we've gone through, a 12,000-year cycle of forgetting. And that's part of a larger cosmic cycle, 25,950 some years, where we're going through the precession of the equinoxes. And never mind that 13th house that's been erased from history. But, we're kind of investigators. We're sleuths, where we're like, okay, and we're exploring and we're curious and we're spelunking. We're going into those dark caves and those sweat lodges, and we're climbing up the mountain. And now that's, don't go too fast. So many people want to go so fast and get so high and be spiritual. And I'm just like, whoa, careful, ground, do the homework, reconfigure all that difficulty so that when you get in a challenging situation, you're the one person in the room that's in loving presence. And Creator has said very clearly, I just need one in the room, Jeffrey. I just need one. I just need one light, and that eradicates all darkness. It's not an ego trip like trying to get to the light. No, it's just simply being there out of conflict, watching your own triggers get triggered so that you can bring it to the loving presence again. Yeah. And that is the initiatic journey of all traditions. And the Andean tradition is one that's of the very few that was never broken. It went way back into the high Andes and on the verge of the Amazon in order to protect itself from the modernization, from the Inquisition, from the conquest, to break those ties. And now it's recognized. And at this time, we will see certain things happening in this world, and people will start to seek that truth. And that's what will come and meet them. And so I think we're all just a part of that larger movement where they say that the wisdom will come down out of the mountains from that 80,000 foot perspective and be hidden amongst the masses, will become the unconscious competence of loving presence again. And that's, we're in the thick of it right now. We're just going through the revelations where we don't really like it and we're confused. Yep. So I know it's a lot of information, but this topic is so fully encompassing. It is a cosmology based in love, consciousness, what is right, because if we're fighting to be right, then we have to make somebody wrong. And in that construct, everybody loses because we're all in war. We're all in separation. We're in the violence of like, I'm protecting myself at your expense, as opposed to how do we come together and sit as a council and come to understand what's best in this given situation, knowing that we're not always going to be able to fulfill everybody's immediate needs, but the harvest will be bountiful. So let's all work in the fields together, so to speak. And I think that's really important, that we start to come out of our fields and our specializations and start to come back together and be a symphony. Somebody's violins, somebody's guitars, somebody's drums, somebody's, woodwind instruments, and really conduct ourselves in a way that's much more graceful and much more holistic and much more loving. And that's what the elders have been storing for us all this time. It's, surprising. It's a way that became uncool, and I think it's going to become cool again. And I think the younger generations that appear to be really lazy are just waiting for something real to get behind. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, that new comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I really connect with everything you're speaking of. For me, it resonates deeply inside of me. I know it's what we're going through. I know that's what I'm going through, and that's what I love about our relationship is we're a mirror to each other. And for me, but we're a mirror of our light instead of being just a mirror of our shadow. Like I had many of these relationships in my life to help me grow, but the relationship me and you have together is bringing this light up and inspiring people and modeling this energy. And this is why, in part, that I created the community Enosis, is to actually help people to practice, to integrate, to embody these knowledge, these codes, and this ancient wisdom, so they can feel it from firsthand experience, not know it in their mind, feel it in their body, feel it in their heart, so it can make their whole being vibrate, so they can remember that this is actually what they've been waiting for all their life, to reconnect with themselves. And for me, one of the strongest practice, we were talking about that grounding. One of the strongest practice that I actually got in touch first time was with the Taoism. It was in my medical Qigong class in 2017, which was exactly at the same time that my dad passed. I needed to be grounded, like there's no tomorrow. Like this time was actually the strongest emotional time that I lived in my whole life, and this was in 2017. And learning the first time I'll remember, the first time we did a meditation called 1 to 10 meditation, which is grounding herself with Mother Earth and opening herself to receive the light of Father Sky, and fusing these lights inside of herself and just radiating that light. The first time I did that, I felt like I was on this 240 volt of energy, like vibrating. Like, oh, I asked the teacher, I was like, what is this meditation? I feel I'm on fire, and I'm a fire. I feel I was like the sun radiating all that light that was just coming through me. And this was actually like an altered state for me.
Yeah,
it was completely altered state of consciousness, but with my eyes open, with the connection to my body and then the connection to other people. So I realized that, wow, there is something that is hidden inside of us that we don't know. And one of my friends calls it internal technologies. So all these technologies we have inside of ourselves, and we can be activating them, but inside we focus on these external technologies. We focus on like everything that's outside of ourselves instead of focusing on what's within. And these codes for me are bringing back the way to these ancient and internal technology that lives inside of us that we're just reactivating. But everything is there. Everything is just latent. It's just waiting for the right button to be pushed to like, oh, wow, this I have that inside of me. This is possible. And connecting with Mother Earth, avec la Terre Maman, it's for me an everyday practice that changed my life forever. When I started to actually ground myself and touch the floor and connect with a tree, connect with a plant, connect with a stone. When we were in Scotland last year, the first stone circle we've did was Avebury. And I don't know if you've ever been to Avebury. There's a big stone circle and there's a village built in the middle. So it's that big. We spent 5 hours connecting with each and every stone in the circle to feel the vibration, to receive and to exchange energy, because that's what we've been told to do in this first day of our trip, to just get in resonance with this wisdom. And it's so powerful that there is no words to describe it. It's coming back home, literally.
Natural.
So, natural. Exactly, natural. There's no pills to take. There's no there's no anything to say. You don't even have to light a candle. Like, you're just like connected with this wisdom that's there. That's a reflection of who we are, and it's just this pure connection of being in unity with these consciousness. And I feel this is what you also experienced when you started doing these practices.
Yeah, definitely. That I've come to understand that all the practices are geographical, climate-based adjustments to one practice. And so the Taoist is the same as the Andes. They all come from a prior civilization. The Wataha, the pre-Maori in New Zealand, are the same as Easter Island, Andes, all the way over to Egypt, all into Samaria and prior. And so these stone megalithic, projects, whether they be in Egypt or Malta or Scotland or wherever they are, they're all the same. They all come, here in Montana, we have megalithic walls out in the mountains here. It all comes from the time before a great flood. And that's referenced in the Bible as a great flood. But it was a reset that happened, and a dumbing down, a loss. It's a deep rabbit hole to go into. But what I can say is that these practices have been stewarded, have been kept. The wisdom has been kept from the knowledge that's gained from the experience, that's gained from the action, that's gained from the thought, that's gained from the belief, that's comes from the perception. And so when we reverse all the way back and we start to clean our glasses and take responsibility for our filtration, whether that be cultural, ideological, theological, whatever, we start to see the bigger picture. And that's what I meant by, we need to become the whole bird, not this left-wing, right-wing identification that we see these days.
Yes.
And it's really important that we come together and speak and share and experience. And then each person comes to their belief and cosmology from their own perception and heart, as opposed to being obeying and being you know, forced into this situation. And so we have to realize that this garden we've been growing has really beautiful aspects, and we need to focus on those and let everything else die back. And that's the thing right now is we get controlled by and everybody looks at that. But where you put your attention is where you create reality. And so the practices are to maintain your connection to the earth, maintain your connection to the stars, so to speak, or the sunlight, just like a tree does, doing photosynthesis, right? Storing, expanding, growing, producing flower, producing fruit, feeding self and feeding the masses. Let the cup runneth over so that we can all be nourished. And it doesn't really matter where you come from or where you're going or what tradition you're in. The key is to, what I had to go through is had to really vet what I was experiencing, because some traditions are very masculine, some are very technical, some are have lost certain aspects of it. So a great deal of traditions have lost it. And the difference between a ceremony and a ritual, as explained by an elder, was a ceremony is one's engagement with all that is and their place and time and function within that. A ritual is forgetting how to do it, but being plugged in and how to get there, but going through the process or the ritual of it to try to remember the ritual. And even in the deep traditions that are connected, a lot of that has been contaminated by commercialization, by ceremonies that are beautiful but go against the protocols set by the realms, so to speak. And what I mean by the realms are the layers and levels and what we call pachas, or spaces of consciousness, that are in energetic form, that can come into physical form at will and then go back out, what is called angels, or what is called this, or ghosts, or there's all kinds of names for them. And that's why it's important to come together for longer periods of time, so all of this information can be shared, so people can start to build a construct of reality, a new habitation, a new place to operate in, a pacha, right? And that's why it's called Pachacuti, the overturning of this space-time continuum. And there's just so much to go into here, and I'm so excited to come together to share in all of this, because my experience has not been easy, and been tested and tried and burnt alive, because when you step into a realm where you have authority for something or you have responsibility for something, you're going to be tested to see what you do in that situation, or if you can handle it. And if you can't handle the fire, you should not be tending the fire. And that's one of the problems we find right now is a lot of people go out and learn some stuff and start a school and start teaching, which in itself and information is great, but they have no idea how to deal with reality when it sets in. And when somebody starts to dig into trauma or experiential reality, and it's way beyond the facilitator's capacity or experiential level, that's just more trauma. So we have to be very careful about that. And there's 10,000 people out there, 100,000 people out there selling snake oil right now. And I don't mean that judgmentally. I just mean that it has become popular and it has become desired by people. But in my experience, and that's all I have, I really sought out to find the maestros, the true holy people that were living it 24/7. And of those that I have sat with, there's 100 times more that are not embodied, meaning that there's a lot of no's to every yes. And we don't need to run around trying on every hat. I think we just need to sit back and wait for that knowing for it to arrive. Or the experience I had, similar to what you had with the film, when I first went down to the Andes, I had an experience that completely blew me out of the water. And I had very deep mystical experiences before that, but the connectivity of the cosmology and the people and the strength of the softness of the masculine in the Andes really touched on something in me that had grown up in the competitive masculine, world in the North, kind of like your former chief. Your chief was talking about, it's like how we are all affected. Our reservations are not quite big enough. And so, when I go back, I was like, I was meant to believe that if I went to the best department store and shopped there, and could wear those things to school, then somehow I had made it.
Yeah.
And that just never really sat with me. And so I went out on a long journey to find it, and it was completely different than what I thought it was going to be. And I realized how ignorant I was. I realized like I have to die continuously. I remember saying to a healer years ago, like, does this ever end? And she was just like, no.
No.
You just learn the tools how to deal with it. And when you finally dealt with your caca, then you can, at that point and only at that point, can you start dealing with others and then serving your community and all that. And I didn't understand any of it back then, but I think I understand a little bit better now.
And I like that you speak about that because this was certainly part of my journey. I'm a recovering savior, trying to save people
Totally.
and like investing all my time,
Oh,
and being
yeah.
a good coach, being a good therapist, like being a good body worker, like being this like presence that would change people's life, And
Oh,
meanwhile, I didn't have to look at myself, because I was like so great helping these
totally.
people, you know,
Totally.
and having all these people calling me and needing me and like wanting me to come earlier to,
Mm.
uh, and
We all
and
have to go through that for sure.
yeah, we all have to go through that, and there's certainly a lot of people like in the health and fitness and even wellness and healing community that like are completely stuck in this savior mindset, and they get sick, they get they have accidents, they sometimes have terminal illness, and so on. And I like what you said one time when I was talking to you, and you said like all these events are actually allies of consciousness
Yeah.
being there to wake you up from the dream that you're living in, from the illusion, so you can come back to yourself. So you can actually awaken from this revolving pattern that keeps on coming back, coming back, coming back.
Mhm.
But if you're not understanding, the next time it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until like you're against the wall and you have to do something. And
But
I
that's all normal. That's the thing
yeah,
that we don't
exactly.
realize is we have to, it's kind of like Chutes and Ladders, that game. You climb up a bit, you slide back down. And what we forget is the compost or the caca, the things that don't work, is the fuel for the alchemist to turn the lead into gold, to get past the state where we're like, okay, I've made it at this level, and now I'm not doing well. And, my ego needs to experience being seen, being recognized, being honored, being all the accolades that come around with conscious competence, knowing what you're doing, right? But because conscious is always expanding, it's like the heartbeat. It goes dunk and then it goes down before it goes back up. And so there's this sine wave, if you will, in this third dimensional density where we are asleep to the fuller aspects of ourselves. And then as we get out of our way and start to evolve and emanate from a deeper place, then we don't need the accolades. But then you're also tested. You're going to get rejected. You're going to get the opposite, because you have to know both sides of the coin
Yeah.
to come to the meta position. And so I just see that all as normal and painful for sure. And we're all kind of like, this is horrible. This is great. And then it's horrible. And I think, you know, for those who take that as inspiration to see the opportunity and the obstacle, those are the ones that find their way through, that don't get deterred. And it really depends on each individual how long we stay in one level of consciousness.
Yeah.
There's 5 stages, right? And so we start and we're pretty unconscious incompetence. We don't know that we don't know. And then we come into a stage where it's conscious incompetence, and that's not pretty and no one likes it. And we certainly don't get accolades for that. And we're embarrassed and we're afraid we're going to be rejected. And all of our traumas come up and we just going to go hide. It's like the guy in the Matrix, just put me back in. I don't remember
Yeah.
anything. Right. And then we come into conscious competence and we start to understand and go through these stages. But at any moment, we're going to discover the unconscious incompetence, because that's the thing that grows the sunflower
Exactly.
higher to go to the sun, right? And then we get into an unconscious competence. We don't have to think about how to ride the bike. We've been doing it all our lives. But each one of these stages is critical. And what I found is that without guidance or without a tradition or without life ways that are based in holistic consciousness, we get really lost and it takes a lot longer. So there's no, I mean, when I was asked to go out in 2007 and take these teachings to the West, I had no idea how arrogant I was because I was assuming that if something was broken, something needed fixing. And I've got these great tools and dun, dun, I'm going to go out and I'm on a mission. Only for like, God knows how many years later to wake up to my hypocrisy and be like, I'm actually focusing on and making this stuff stronger because I believe it's wrong.
Yeah.
And then you eat your humble pie and then you go back to the tradition. They're like, congratulations, you woke up to the ridiculousness of your mind. Now let's take you to another level of consciousness. Bam. And then you come out, kind of piece it back together. And I can tell you honestly, that's what I'm doing right now. I've spent the last 2 years in sabbatical, going inside, cleaning up. And these last 2 days, I've gone through 25 years of my hard drives to organize it and throw out old stuff. And so the internal is the external and the external is the internal. And what more great of time on our planet to do it than in the sheer circus that is being presented on purpose outside of us as a tool to wake up. You want to stay in the circus or do you want to exit the circus? And, the circus is great. It's elephants and trapeze and fire-eating dragons, everything. But I don't know that for most people is the solution anymore. And thank God, because we're not being duped into the seduction of an Hermès bag or a whatever. We've kind of all gotten there, right? And now we're like, well, what's real? And that fits the prophecy, when people get tired of power trips, they'll start seeking the truth. And this is the perfect time, I believe, that the lineages in the world are starting to share. The Mamos in Colombia are sharing now. Yeah. And it's all because the humans are hungry and they're sick of the candy, and they're sick of the trick or treat. And now they want to move towards All Saints Day. And now they want to move into, as we in the North, as we grow through these next, 7 weeks of darkness and shrinking light, when it gets darker and darker and darker, that's where it's very easy to find the light because one match changes it all. And then we get back into cycles. So if we're listening to ourselves and if we're listening to this, what's the cycle that you want? What's the life you want? What are your needs and how do you need to be supported in order to achieve those needs? And what I found out there studying in a lot of traditions and through a lot of teachers is kind of this didactic academic model that everybody scrambles to regurgitate or even sacrifice to get the funding in order to be recognized.
Yeah.
And that model is incomplete in so many different ways. So if we can get into a model where we're like, oh, this is information that supports me to do the work. And that runs into the part of us that doesn't know how and therefore doesn't want to do the work. It's kind of like my teenager. It's just like, I just want it to be. I just take the pill and suppress the messenger, the symptom. Yeah. So we suffer in dis-ease and don't do the alchemy to get to the ease. And so what I encourage is people to find truth, find support, find reality, have the emotional experience that they have, like you expressed with the film. And then learn how to be supported so that you can become the master of your own universe. You can become consciously competent. And one of the things I find out, and this occurs with women very often, is they don't have the experience of being supported by men. And so they don't know how to receive support. So their behavior repeats into feminist separation. And at some point, we're going to realize that the feminist gives way to the feminine. And the masculine dominance, protector, provider, all that gives way to the supportive aspect. Because in a sunflower, the staff, or in a tree, the trunk is the masculine aspect that's holding the flower that's holding the branches. And then the leaves and the needles, the flowers are the feminine. They're receiving the ray, the DNA information that comes through the photonic light. They're receiving and they're generating. And that balance in us has to be restored. And that the whole trans agenda is to throw that off, to destroy the natural balance between masculine and feminine inside of us and the loving relationship outside of us. And so when we get into this, we can see all the way down into all of these avenues that have been falsified. And what I came to realize is that if that's all untrue, then what is true? And that begins the quest or the questions. That becomes the great journey home. And then through searching since I was 19, I'm 58 now, you go out and you try this smorgasbord and you try that restaurant, you try this, you try that. This works, this works, this works, this works, this works, but this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't. And that is an important process for each of us to go through, because we need to discern what is truth, what is false, what applies, what doesn't apply. And sometimes we don't even know. And sometimes some elders will do coyote teachings and send you on a false journey so you get mad at them, so you come to your own truth and stop relying on somebody outside yourself, some false authority, or some, not false authority in that they're wrong or false, but something other than your own divine connection with creation. So there's a lot to unpack in there. And, I hope we have the opportunity to sit for long periods of time, because we got to take people through it. We got to, find something in your life and then show them how to do the alchemy, because all of that instruction's been lost. That's certainly not, I'm appalled at what my children go through in school, because they're not learning how to live.
No.
And so then it's our responsibility to complement that with life ways and structures and programs and communities that are based in the authenticity of tried and true living practices that have been kept for us on purpose for us who are ready to remember.
Yeah. And it's all coming with the right timing. There's no error. There's no mistakes. Like it's all coming with this divine timing. And one thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier on in the conversation was about reconnecting to what ones will call natural time instead of artificial time. So instead of like working on this clock of like this 12 to 60 ratio, like 60 minutes per hour, 12 months a year, coming back to the natural time, which is 13 moon cycles, 28 days cycles. And the Mayans are also, they have a calendar called the Tzolk'in, which actually is an hologram of the human body, which represents the 13 joints that we have in our body, like 2 wrists, 2 elbows, 2 shoulders, 2 ankles, 2 knees, 2 hips, and 1 central line. And if you add up, like which they call the 13-20 ratio, and there's 20 solar seal, which add up to 5 fingers of each hand and the 2 feet. So 20, 10 toes, 10 fingers, which does 20. And if you add 20 plus 13, you're having 33, which is the number of vertebrae in the body.
Exactly.
So, which is a 260-day cycle, which is a galactic calendar, which is a reflection, as they say in Taoism, as above, so below. So it's just a reflection inside of us of what we see outside of us. And I've been actually almost completing a full 9 months, a full 260 days of following this cycle. And the amount of synchronicity that I gathered connecting to the energy of the day, of the moon that we were in, is out of this world. It just blew my mind how this can happen and how we can actually surf the energy instead of resisting the energy, instead of pushing our agenda. What about receiving? What about being the sunflower that is just receiving the energy of the day and actually listening from the inside. Is this a day of action? Is this a day of introspection? Is this a day of
Yeah.
communication? Is this so? What's the energy of the day? And to flow with this energy instead of trying to push
Yeah.
something, trying to make this project happen, trying to make these tasks happen. Um, so for me, this is a process of not only remembering inside of herself, but receiving what is coming from, and that was when we say we're a channel of energy in between earth and heaven.
Yeah.
So connecting with that energy and just being a channel, like you said, you've been sitting under the tree for 2 years. We're not asking people to sit under the tree for 2 years, and maybe it is for you, but just by doing simple practices that helps you to come back to yourself and
Okay.
put the mental chatter on pause, like just put that in a box for a few moments and just listen to what's inside, to what your heart is saying, what your body is saying. Just listen to the temperature of your body, just listen to your heartbeat, listen to the speed of your breath, just by connecting to these processes that are going on 24/7 without even like us noticing it, but just by pausing and listening to it and becoming conscious
Exactly.
of what's going on inside of me. I'm seeing these people that uh, they say I'm not stressed, but they have chronic pain. They say I'm stressed 2 on 10. Like you have chronic pain, you're stressed, you're not aware of it. And let me show you the different ways that you can be aware of it, and so you can become consciously incompetent. So you can actually become at some point consciously competent. But it's as simple as that. And sometimes I find people are, and I've been certainly that person, to look like for the specific tip, to go into such details about like wanting to seek something so special that will like be the magic pill.
Yeah.
And what I realized doing that is not only it's exhausting, but it never happened. There is no magic pill out there. There is no uh, thing that was going to be given to you, and then all of a sudden your life will change.
It reminds me of a woman in London who came to have a session and was furious at the end because she literally said, I thought you were going to have a magic wand and hit me on the top of the head and all my problems would go away. And I just sat
Yeah,
there like, nope, and it's, while you were speaking, I remembered a video I just saw about Gen Z, so the younger folks. And there's a whole thing going on now where people will turn off their device and sit quietly, no music, no interrupts for 15 minutes. And so where does that come from? Where does the young, dopamine triggered population suddenly decide I'm just going to sit in silence for 15 minutes a day? I think that comes from a very deep place. And I think we're so busy or have been programmed
yeah,
to be busy. I mean, right? We're all dealing with our death gauges, a mortgage, right? And how much can I burden? How extrapolated can I be? How hedged can I be? How cantilevered can I be in order to find a measure of success or comfort from the bane of the existence of mental slavery? Pardon for the harshness there, but you know.
yeah.
And so we have kids, young adults now just turning everything off for 15 minutes. We have ancient traditions that have been teaching this forever. And we have the vast majority of the population, 80%, if not more, 90%, that's still struggling to even have the time, the luxury of time to do any type of what you might call a spiritual pursuit. So the thing that, because I've done a lot of that and searched a lot of that and kind of whittled away and kept what works and dropped what didn't, I've come to understand that it has to be incredibly normal. It has to be incredibly accessible. It has to be relatable. It has to like
Yeah.
hit the pavement and get a lot of traction. And if it doesn't, it's a waste of time, you know? And so a lot of the things that are taught are or experienced or supported are very practical ways that somebody with a family that, have two jobs, that are stressed in all these ways, that are suffering, can just implement into the life. And quite naturally, when you you like taste honey, for example, you know the difference between honey and cane sugar, or artificial sweetener. You feel it in your body. In the same way, these life ways support in a way that you suddenly like, why am I seeking attention outside when I could sit here in the sunshine and bring my attention into my intention, and then I can open and be that flower in the room. And sure, people may ridicule me, but I can walk in the supermarket and shine. Not because I'm trying to shine, but that's my natural state. And so we're really at the place where we're at the last chapter. We're at the end of this period, and yet the Aquarian age already started. So the hero's journey ended. We don't need to go slay the dragon and prove our worth and come home the hero. Now we begin the lover's journey, and that is to return back to the eagle, the Quetzalcoatl, the condor, the life force, the wellspring. And like you mentioned, the 33 vertebrae, that's Jacob's ladder. The story of Santa Claus, the colostrum that drips down out of the pineal gland, goes down the spinal cord, right? Goes into the hearth, the sacrum. And then through our attention, we climb the ladder of consciousness back up again, right? Initiatic journey, right? And in doing so, as you get higher, naturally the densities, the actions, the beliefs, the compensations, all that stuff falls away. And so what we did yesterday may not work tomorrow. And then we have to be willing to let go. There's a saying, the last thing we need is more spoons. We need more knives. We need to cut off all the stuff that is entrapment. And when you're carrying $100,000 in student debt or if you're mortgaged or whatever, that can be hard because you have to stay in that system. And so that's why the new system is based on providence. And the new system is based on authenticity, transparency, bioresonance. And as we start to prepare ourselves for that, we're naturally going to have to let go. I'm being a little bit careful with my words here on purpose, but you're going to realize that things aren't working, and that means it's time to let go. You're going to be more tired. You're going to be more frustrated. You're going to be more achy and pain. That's the process of climbing that ladder. What's in spiritual circles is called the ascension process. But in actuality, it's starting to accept that, well, maybe I need to take a nap in the afternoon on a weekend. Maybe I don't need to go out and entertain myself through putting whatever in my body. Maybe I just need to make a fire and tend to the hearth and let my soul climb back up to a higher perspective up here, And the only way we're going to do that is individually and collectively, in my opinion, reach a state of frustration and then choose to do something different. So it's the opportune time not to show up as a savior, but just as a messenger, and just be like, yeah, there's water right there if you're hungry. You're not leading the horse to water. You can't make them drink, but you can just leave it out on the trail in case people are thirsty. And that's probably the hardest journey we'll make, because for all of you that are waking up, you're going to increasingly realize not everybody's going along at the same speed. And there's certain conversations you yet can have with people in your immediate circles. And for the last years, a lot of people that are awake or aware have been called crazy, right?
Yeah.
And if you're crazy in a crazy world, that's a double negative to me. That means you're sane. It's just the other world's stuck in an old paradigm based on fear, entrapment, leverage, whatever it is, But that leads me to understand an elder's wisdom, which was, 11, 12% of us are awake. Another 18, 19% are aware. That's 30%.
Yeah.
60% are kind of NPC. They're not really playing in the reality. They're just there to give you the whatever in the shop. But the elders said, and I don't mean that as a judgment. What I mean is that the elders said, be careful, because in the evolution of a soul, souls have different lifespan. Newer souls, meaning ones that are generated before others, are just working on survival. They're just putting food on the table. They're just trying to entertain themselves. So for all of our egos and our arrogance, let's think, you guys are stupid, wake up, which we've all, found ourselves staring in the mirror with.
Absolutely.
And then those people will then turn when the 100th monkey happens, and suddenly red is the new blue, or blue is the new red, or whatever color we're following. we turn to that way because there's leadership, meaning there's courage, meaning there's knowledge, meaning there's a space where I'm going to do this. I'm going to walk out to the edge of this nest, and no other duck in this nest has taken flight yet. And mama birthed us way up in the tree to protect us from the ground animals. But I've got to get from here to that pond, and I don't know how to fly. And there's ones that jump first, and that's the first wave. And then there's a second wave, the aware ones. And then the third wave is the big one, where the masses come. And then at the end, there's a 10% out there that doesn't matter what you say or prove or anything. They're just hell-bent on staying where they're at. And that's fine, because that's a soul's evolution.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that, I think it's important to remember that if we interfere with their journey, it delays their awakening. Because when you push hard against someone who's stuck, it triggers their limbic response, fight, flight, freeze. And then their defense mechanisms push back in opposition, grounding both of you in duality and third dimensional drama, right? So we gotta, instead of doing this, we gotta find, in the Andes, we have it, Yananting, Masinting, that which is similar, Masinting, that which is opposite, find their highest aspects and bring together. And then the new reality is, and this falls away. Just like the leaves, as they fall off the tree, they rot into the ground and become compost. Our mistakes, our caca, the biggest shithead there is that we think of. That person is in the process of building up to the place where they're going to then get sick, fall down, the allies of consciousness, like you talked about. So that's all a natural cycle, and we have to honor that. And I find that we can be there kind of like a water station on the Tour de France, right? And as the riders, the souls come along, if they want water, they can take it. But we're not forcing it on anybody because, again, that's getting in their way. And that took me a long time to understand, especially when my ego was involved in the tradition, said, go out and, share this information, teach people. Great.
It's a big test on its own.
Right. But that's all part of this construct that we're having to take off and set aside. And then we're left exposed like a lobster that needs to regrow its shell. So then what do? We're vulnerable. I don't like vulnerability. And yet, what are we risking? Love, right? Because at the end of the day, everything comes to love. Everything comes to light. This is all just temporal learning. Well, when it falls away, what's left is the tender arms of a wise person saying, it's okay, I got you. We're children, and we pick up our children when they're crying, and we hold them and we pet them, and you're okay. And then they get comfortable, and then they want to go out and play in the world again. Yeah. It doesn't matter what your age is. That's our learning process. And so I just find that, eldership or wisdom is dispensed from a place of experiential learning. And sometimes the elders are really judged because they're not perfect. Mm-hmm. Because they've had the audacity to fall down and get back up. And yet the Buddha said, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Right? So we are all experiential beings. I've certainly, ho'oponopono, I have certainly fallen down and gotten up and brought it to the light. And we all do that in every way. Just a simple thing of like, this is mine. And in the Quechua language, they have no word to have. There's no possessive. They're just with. So what would our world be like if we're with all that all the time? So again, there's so much to tie together and so much to share. And, I look forward to the opportunities to really experientially go into that. And I don't know, maybe you want to do a quick journey into something just to allow the people who are watching the opportunity to.
Yeah, I would love if you can lead us into one of the practices that you hold dearly that is a start actually to go from unconscious incompetence to conscious competence. And please.
Well, I think the acceptance of what is really important, and understand that what is just perception. So one of the practices I do, if we'll all just go inside, close your eyes, take a couple of breaths, let go of the jaw, unclench the heart, squeeze the shoulder blades together behind us, lift the heart open. Take a deep breath and then drop down even further and come right down into our belly. And if you will, see yourself sitting at a fireplace, a great hearth. It's actually your sacrum, right? And that's the story of Santa Claus coming down and eating the cookies and bringing presents, loving presents. That is the gift. So one of the things I do is when I'm sitting under a tree or at a stoplight, and if I take too long, somebody will honk and let me know to get going. But just give yourself the time, space to drop down. And then if you look around yourself, inside yourself, you're going to discover all the debris of your past experience. So there's the fight between you and so-and-so. There's the betrayal. There's the trauma. There's the this. There's the that. Take that debris and make a fire in your hearth. Right? All that emotional detritus and debris that's down around the belly that is insulated by layers of fat because the energy outside is too strong and it aggravates the energy inside. So I distance myself by becoming unattractive, by insulating myself, or what people think is unattractive when it's just a compensatory behavior. So in that cave, in that space that is well armored, that is protected, that is numb, that is in pain, that is where your energy lies. And those entanglements can be freed by taking that debris and building a fire with it in that hearth. And so I simply stack up the wood, and each thing that comes up, it's like when I make a fire, I blow that prayer and that release and put it on the fire and release it to the flame so it can do its alchemy, so it can transition itself, transform itself. Right? And so then find the match of your consciousness and strike that match and set the debris on fire. And as it starts to warm up and spread in that hearth, start to recognize the energy of the sun that is entrapped in a log, or your life force energy that is entrapped in the entanglement, in that brush, in that bramble, in those thorns. And set it free and feel the warmth come back to you. It's like a soul retrieval. And when it starts to die down and you're ready for another one, you reach around and you find another one. Oh, there's that argument with my mom. There's that breakup with the girlfriend, with the boyfriend. There's that betrayal. Here's that whatever it is that I saw only as that because that's the only perspective I had, and that's what society allowed me. Because no one taught me about unity consciousness. No one taught me in that time space to work with my meridians so it doesn't sit in my body and become short-term parking. That becomes my premenstrual syndrome that comes out hormonally to clear it out. And I'm just repressing that too. So then it's going to become long-term parking, which means the photonic light is going to freeze and become horizontal and sit in my body. And I'm going to reproduce that in my cells because I copy what is there before. And that is called dis-ease and aging. So I'm going to take all that debris and I'm going to put it on the fire. And I'm going to ask this fire to transform it in such a way that I can feel the heat and the warmth of that and reinvigorate my body in these cold places where I've occupied, where I've been in isolation, where I am numb, where I'm angry. And I let that anger realize what it is, which is unrealized sadness. And I'm going to put that sadness on the fire and let it burn off until it becomes joy, because sadness is unrealized joy. So anger is the unrealized sadness, and sadness is the unrealized joy. And I'm going to sit in the warmth of my fire and tend to my fire and feel contentment. And I'm going to feel the joy of the transformation of my debris. And I'm going to recognize it not as something that I have to hide from or put under the carpet or store inside me, but the fuel, the compost that grows this vessel. And so as the smoke from that fire rises up through the 33 steps of Jacob's ladder and up through the Hara line, up through the chakras, and emanates out of the crown, it disperses out into the universe and then falls back to earth in the toroidal field. and goes back into the earth mother, the Pacha. And then I pull the renewed energy, the pure energy up through my spine, and it feeds the fire. And then I look around in my daily practice, or when something happens, I take a moment and I'm like, let me tend to my fire here. And when I make the fire each morning here, as the winter is approaching, I do the same thing. Throw a little sage on there, you know? Learn to work in ceremonial ways so that I'm conscious of everything I'm doing. And in more advanced stage of that, one will just simply become aware or be aware of every thought they have. And any thought that's not in harmony and love, it'll be reeled back and reconfigured. And that takes some dedication and devotion. But to me, that is a good life. So if we are out and absent-minded or working in conditions that are not perfect, then we can start to value certain things. There's always a cost to having an income. And I find wealth is my free time. And I don't need much. And I've never met a true maestro that finds satisfaction in external things. I've always found them to be pretty simple, because that, as Da Vinci said, is the ultimate sophistication. It's past the acquisition stage. And yet, for most of us, we need to experience acquisition and external contentment before we get to internal contentment. So this practice is one where you can just simply close your eyes and tend to your fire. You can light a tea light candle in your house and have a fire ceremony in the same thing. And that candle will burn that intention through the day and night, and hold that consciousness in that flame if we're distracted by other things. And that's why there's always candles in churches and temples and things like that. It's a set of an intention. So I think that's a really simple way to reconnect and to take care of our inner world in our house. And then what you'll find is, because that is not in there, you're not carrying that into new relationships. You're not carrying that into new situations. You're actually enlightened, right? You've illuminated through the warmth, through the process of burning that all. And one other thing I would mention is, an elder said to me, add the line, and may all the debris return to heaven. And that way, all of the extrapolations are there. So you're literally pulling the knife out of the person you stuck it in without even being near them. And then recognizing what knives you think you have in you from other. You've agreed to it because it's in your causal body. You drove your car into that intersection, even though somebody else ran into you. So there's a tremendous amount of self-responsibility that goes with this, and a tremendous amount of learning how to be aware of what's really going on, so that the perspective is not blocked. Because literally, in Chinese medicine, they're called shin gates. Our perspective, the gates of light, close off. If I'm repressed, something in the yellow is, spectrum is going to be closed. So I can't have white light consciousness because I'm missing yellow. So it's going to turn a different color, which is going to be like wearing yellow or rose-colored glasses or anything like that, right? So, and interestingly enough, in that one, repression is yellow, which is complementary color is blue, which is here. So if I'm repressed, I'm not going to speak. And then I may sit around complaining, no one hears me. I know, because you're not talking. And so the irony is, we're self-manifesting, self-creative vehicles that have been operating without a proper operating system. And the vast majority of us are trying to create something different by doing the same thing, which is Einstein's definition of insanity.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's just a matter of adding more holistic constructs, paradigms, lifeways, codes into the matrix, into the computer, so that it becomes a quantum understanding, on and off at the same time. And depending on where I put my focus, that's what it is. And having enough belief that believing is seen, and that supersedes seeing as believing. So there's a lot to go into to flesh this out, but I hope you've done a decent job to color in some of the coloring book.
Well said. Well, thank you for this practice, Jeffrey. And if I can share a little bit of how I experienced it,
Mm.
It was really powerful, like the putting the debris and like lightening up with consciousness and letting it burn inside of me created a lot of lightness. And then at a certain point, you finish the practice, and then my wife opened the door behind me, and then I have a thought like, what the hell, and then I just like took this
Perfect.
thought and put it in the fire, and then just
Exactly.
like
Yeah. And just to think how much we run away with those thoughts.
Yeah, well, of course, like it went to like, I'm gonna talk to her, I'm gonna tell her like it is, and then like just bringing that into the fire and just like getting like the opportunity to break free from this collective pattern that we have, that we've been taught so many times, to just like let go of it. It's not necessary anymore.
Yeah.
It's not useful. Just
and
let go of
the
it.
practices are so simple.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to believe times, but I find the most profound practices are the most simple. And I mean, that's a perfect example. How many times have we just rode that horse of anger at some innocent person walking through a door saying, "Are you still working?"
Yeah.
My God.
I'm laughing deeply. It's my medicine.
Totally. And we're all there. That's the joke. It's like, some people think they're whatever doesn't stink. And it's like, it only stinks if we make it stink. So, yeah, I mean, that's not a proper way to say that. What I mean is that we have the ability through our free will to choose our response at every moment. Now, what's preconditioned and what's triggered? And then if you are triggered, okay, so what techniques do I use to bring it back? The fire is a good one.
Yeah. Love the fire. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's an element that I hold dear to my heart. Like it's literally in my heart, the fire. So
Exactly.
it was really easy to access it. And on a closing note to what we just shared, for me, at the beginning of this old journey of transforming myself, was you said it earlier, acceptance of what's happening right now inside of me. Accepting like there's a part of me that's angry, there's a part of me that wants to yell at someone, there's a part of me that's telling me I'm so stupid to have said that or to have not done that. And it was to accept and do nothing, to just stay in observation of this like blah, 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 inside of me, instead of fueling it or acting upon it, was just to and breathe and release the energy that was present, and accept that, oh, this is living inside of me, therefore it needs my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And
honoring
it was difficult
sorry,
at the beginning.
Yeah, and also honoring that our limbic brain's job is to keep us safe. The problem is it only has its experience. It can't see beyond it. So the simple practice is maybe, what other perspective can I have? What opportunity lies here? Meanwhile, is trying to go to war. And then when we go there, we go into that space of cognitive dissonance where we repiece words together and realities together to fit our survival strategy.
Yeah.
And then we just sit in the river of the eddy in the river all the time. We're afraid to go over the waterfall, but what if the waterfall is horizontal and the river is actually vertical? What perspective are you looking at this situation? One of the things I often ask people is like, okay, I understand that, but what's the genesis of that thought? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so yeah, but what's below that? What's below the anger? Sadness. What's below sadness? Joy. Well, I'm angry because I'm not touching my joy. I know, right? So we're creating reality without even knowing it, and that's part of the fall or the sleeping. And consciousness is quite easy when we give it space. But to give it space, we have to grow really good at, like you were talking about, watching this other voice, and just be like, yeah, okay, I understand, but We're not going to go to war. We're going to go to love. And that's the shift from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age, the hero's journey to the lover's journey. I mean, when at the end of Joseph Campbell's life, I have a friend who was close to him. He said he was looking for the new cosmology. He was looking for the new mythology. He was looking for this new archetypical energy, and it wasn't here yet. But he had died back prior to this shift. And now, as we are carrying the mantle, so to speak, we start to realize, oh, it truly is like, okay, we've made the journey. Now we come back home. It's kind of the story of St. Francis. And, you know, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon is a beautiful film. And it speaks to what we're talking about here. And how when you come back from war and you create peace, you're ridiculed because you're ignorant, you're, you know, endangering, you're this, you're that, the other thing. So at the end of the day, no matter what path you're on, as an elder told me long ago, they all go to the same place. Some are just more painful and take longer. So for that, I've just realized through 30 some years of my life exploring out in the world, in the structures that are there, there was always something missing, the mana, the energy. And then I just, you know, found myself going to nature all the time and taking a break, sitting under the tree. After directing in Los Angeles, I just moved to the forest and lived in a small cabin in the woods. And, you know, you have to make a lot of adjustments. But again, the value, I believe, lies in the value of your time. And then in that, you'll sit there and, like I have and others have, I'm not doing enough. What am I doing? And guidance just says, keep doing what you're doing. Well, I'm not doing anything. You get in these existential arguments, right? I'm not doing anything. We'll keep doing that, but I'm not doing, right? Because the value is misplaced. And eventually it opens to a deeper part of the ocean that you had no idea was there. And the funny thing is for all the millions of miles on frequent flyer clubs, it's right here. Like, it's just such a cosmic joke. It's ridiculous. But you can't say that to somebody that is hell-bent on going over there. It's course. Just like, okay, well, when you get there, send me a postcard. Let me know how it is. Right. And that's what that ties back into, we cannot get in the way of a soul's development. You cannot take on the suffering. You cannot rescue. You cannot be the savior. You can't even, well, there's a brick wall ahead and you're driving 100 kilometers an hour. Like, slow down. Shut up. I'm going to speed up. And that's that limbic response. I'm going to prove you true because I've been betrayed to the core. And that's the fallacy of the original sin. So I'm really grateful that the elders have invited me to sit with them, to chant with them, to sit in their sweat lodges, climb the mountains with them, to meet angels, to show me through, you know, apprenticeship, meaning hands-on, how to build a fire. And I think it's our responsibility to then pass that along. So I don't really have anything to teach. I don't have anything to, you know, there's no agenda. I laughingly ran into myself, you know, 20 years ago when I tried to have an agenda to fix something that wasn't broken. So I'm really grateful to come together and to see what unfolds.
Well, I'm glad that we find each other again in this day and age, and to collaborate and bring more of this light so people can remember their own light. And we'll be announcing further development of the work of me and Jeffrey. That's going to be coming online first and in person up here in Quebec and in other places. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your story, your energy, and your connection.
Likewise.
It's an honor and always a privilege to co-create with you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, likewise.
And I'm looking forward to the next collaboration.